Hello, everyone. Aubrey Arms here to awaken your greatness. I want to talk to you about having difficult conversations today. I have a success story. I'm so thrilled. I want to share it. I want to shout it to the rooftops about what's possible when we do difficult conversations, when we do them well. So let me set up the scene for you. I helped facilitate a crunchy conversation between a CEO and her employee. And now, just to give you a little bit of background, you're probably familiar with this kind of scenario. Either you as a leader have had this, or maybe you as an employee have had this, where there was a communication breakdown along the way. Things were going fine, and then all of a sudden there was a communication breakdown. Now, what we're finding out is that with COVID happening and people working remotely, not being in that physical proximity, just being able to drop in into somebody's office or just even like holler down the hallway, here's what's up. The lack of physical proximity is creating a huge gap and a huge disconnection in conversations and in communication. So I've been consulting with a client of mine. I'm working with the CEO of the business and coaching her on how to be a better executive, a better CEO, and helping her be a better leader. I'm also working with her and her team and helping the communication gaps that are there and those breakdowns and really reinforcing the communication pathways and helping them really up level themselves as an organization, but more importantly, how they communicate and how they can up level from this good to great status. So communication had been broken down. The employee started to disconnect. She started to pull away. She started to get disenchanted. She was starting to get a little grumpy. And instead of talking to the person that she needed to talk to, which was with her boss, with the CEO, and really addressing the issues directly, she was stuffing them down, and she was letting them grow, and they started to become really toxic. And so that's where I stepped in. I said, there's clearly a communication breakdown happening here. We need to mend that and to really get clear communication flowing again, because that's what you need to have a healthy, thriving organization. If your communication is broken, your business is broken in a way. Your sales and your revenue are going to plummet. Your satisfaction and your engagement are going to plummet. So it's really important that we have open, clean, clear communication pathways. And so you can imagine, not everybody's looking forward to having this conversation, right? Most of us, we want to avoid these difficult conversations. We want to avoid them at all costs. So let me tell you what can happen in one of these crunchy conversations or one of these difficult conversations when they're done well. We came together, we met each other as humans, heart to heart, where we're at, with this mutual respect for each other, the mutual respect for the professionalism, the good work that has been done before. It just so happens that these two have a 10-year history of working together. And so all of that was starting to crumble and break away. And by the time we were done with this conversation, the employee who had started to turn disgruntled, started to be a complainer, started to do some like toxic behaviors, that employee was so lit up. She was glowing. And at the end of the conversation, she's like, oh my gosh, I feel so free. I feel a freedom that I haven't felt in such a long time. And that was a true testament to the power of difficult conversations done well. And instead of depleting us and taking away our energy, how they can actually give us energy and breathe life into us. And so I have a few notes here. I want to read some of these notes of what the employee was going through and what her blocks and her obstacles were and what she learned along the way. So there was a situation that occurred, right? There was a situation that occurred, and the leader, the CEO, made some decisions that the employee didn't agree with, and quite frankly, she didn't like. Now, what we discovered in this conversation that there was actually some information that the employee didn't have. but she didn't realize that there was missing information. And therefore, she was creating a lot of judgments against the CEO and her leadership style for how the situation was handled. So through the conversation, we were able to reveal there's actually a lot more to the story than what you recognize. There was all this stuff happening that you didn't know about because it wasn't really appropriate for you to know about it. And as a coach, a consultant, and a human resources professional, I can tell you that there's always more to the story. So as individuals, we want to watch our judgments. Oftentimes when we're missing information, we kind of get ourselves worked up and we make judgments and assumptions about how things should go because we don't have the full picture. And so the employee, she was just like, okay, this is petty. I'm gonna let it go. I'm gonna let it go and I'm just gonna move on. But what she discovered is that she actually didn't let it go. That this straggler, if you will, like the emotions that she felt, they actually dug in. And as she tried to move forward, the thing that this judgment, this upset that she had moved forward with her. And not only did it move forward with her, but it grew, because now all of a sudden she's got this upset in her, and now she's like scanning and she's looking for more evidence that her judgments are true. And so now this thing, it's like snowballing and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it was having a significant negative impact in the business. Communication not only broke down between the CEO and this employee, but it was starting to break down with other departments as well, excuse me. And then what started happening is the employees started bringing people in and complaining and doing the gossip thing. And so then we're creating factions and sides. And so there was just a lot of turmoil happening as a result of not dealing with this thing head on. So I want to let this be a caution and a word to the wise. If you're somebody out there that you're just like, oh, there's this thing that happened and maybe it doesn't need to be brought up. I don't want to bring it up. I don't want to talk about it. Maybe it's petty. Or, as was in this case, I don't know how to bring it up. I don't know how to bring it up in the right way, or, in a way that wasn't emotional, in a way that was professional, in a way that was respectful. And that's a common thing. We have these emotions that come up and we don't know how to address them in a way that isn't emotional. And so we just clam up and we hold on to them. But then we carry them with us and they grow and they grow and they become toxic monsters in your business. So here I come into the picture and I notice the dynamic that's happening. I'm like, we've got to get you guys together and clear this up. And the result of not only them having the conversation. So it wasn't just a simple fact that they came together to have the conversation, but they came together to have this conversation being facilitated by a professional that understands communication, that understands humans and our behaviors and how we operate in business and outside of business. And it was through the facilitation of and slowing down the conversation in certain parts and making sure certain things that were said were really heard, weren't glossed over, and really creating psychological safety in the workplace and giving this employee an experience of coming forward with something that's on their hearts that they can't get rid of on their own, to say, this thing happened and it upset me because this goes against our company values or whatever it might be. And to be able to give them an experience of safety to bring it forward and be received well. In fact, to say, thank you. Thank you for bringing this thing forward, because clearly it's having a negative impact by you holding it. And you have permission. And that was a brilliant part on the CEO's part. She says, you have permission to give me feedback. And there's so many times in business that we imply things or we assume people know things, but we don't give that explicit permission, or we just don't even say it explicitly. You have permission to give me feedback. we work together. Even though one's a boss and one's a subordinate, we work together. And so feedback flows both ways through that. And so hearing that, having the experience for the employee to have the experience of this thing, by the way, this has been something that she'd been dragging around for at least a year, if not longer. This thing that had happened quite a while ago. And so for her to be able to say it, to be messy in it, to not have to do it perfectly, for her to be received well, for her to even be thanked, to say thank you. Thank you for bringing this uncomfortable thing forward so we can clean it up. And then for her to get permission to say, yes, please do more of this. Please give me more feedback. It's a game changer. So by the time she left, she was like, oh my gosh, I feel so free, because this monkey that had been on my back and had been growing and getting more and more intense is now gone, because we had this conversation and we worked it through. So for any of you that are out there that you're noticing that communications are breaking down, that you're displeased or you're unsatisfied, or maybe you're just even having some like body reactions, right? Like you might get that pit in your stomach of like, oh God, like when I think about working with this person, it just drags me down. It gives me this pit in the stomach. Or maybe you notice like your throat tightens up when you think about having that conversation with someone. Or, maybe your heart closes up. I have a client, her cheeks get warm, or she has a sensation on the back of her arms. And so I work with people to help them understand the embodied intelligence, the communication that your body's doing with you, to help your mind catch up to say, we need to take some action. We need to clear up the communication pathway. So instead of being a prisoner to the monkey on your back, or to the pit in your stomach, or that closed heart or the closed up throat, instead of being a prisoner to that and being a prisoner to the dis-ease and the uncomfortableness that happens as a result of the communication breaking down, I really encourage you, go have that difficult conversation. Go have that crunchy conversation. It is really the key to setting you free and setting free the other person. And if you are like, great, that sounds great, but I have no idea how to do it. I don't know. I don't have the skills. I've not been trained. This particular client that I'm talking about, this is a woman who's been in business for almost 30 years. She's approaching her 30th year in business. And she was like, why have I never learned these things that you're teaching me on how to communicate, how to really own myself as a CEO and own the success that I've created in my business over the 30 years. Why have I never learned this before? And quite frankly, it's because in business, we've never talked about these things before. It's really right now that this is becoming the forefront, and really recognizing the importance of our mental state, our emotional state, of making sure we have psychological safety in the workplace, making sure we're tending to our mental health of ourselves as leaders, as our people. It's just now that we're really being able to integrate the full person in the work experience. And so if you're like her, if you're like my client, that's just like, I've never learned how to do this. I've been doing a business a long time. I don't have these skills. Please let me know if there's a way I can help you. I facilitate crunchy conversations for a living. And I come in and I work with both parties, and I bring the parties together, all for the mutual beneficial of each party and the business. And so we want to create a win-win-win for everyone. And I'll be honest, sometimes we can't create the win-win-win, but what we do accomplish is we recognize that we don't necessarily have the right people in the right seats on the right bus. Sometimes we have people that need to be on a different bus, right? Or they need to have a different role. And so in the recognition of that, where it may be time to say, you know what, this isn't working out. We have philosophical differences. We have different values that are inherently going to get in the way. Then we can work towards having a really positive, healthy ending to that relationship instead of it turning toxic, which is costly. It's costly for us as a human level, and it's costly for the business. So you've got toxicity in your business. I guarantee you, your revenues and your client satisfaction isn't anywhere what it could be. And communication is the key. So if you've been dreading those conversations, if you've been avoiding those conversations, I want to give you the story of freedom, of levity, of light, of joy, of a reconnected relationship. And that's what's possible. This woman now, instead of being potentially a toxic employee, that, inevitably that's what was going to happen. And we were on the verge of that. We've now been able to connect, to communicate, to open those pathways where now she actually gets to be a champion for the company. She actually gets to step into her greatest version of herself that this thing was getting in the way of. And so now she's excited. She is delighted. She is more engaged and satisfied in her job than she has been in the whole 10 years that she's worked there, simply because we opened up that communication pathway. So you can tell I'm excited. You can tell I'm so excited about what's possible when we open up that communication. So try it out. Step into what those conversations are that you think are difficult. If there's any way that I can be of service to you, let me know. All right, that's it for me today. Aubrey Arms here to awaken your greatness. Go out there and shine and sparkle, because more than ever, we need shining examples of great